which is, look, we get data every so often, and based on that monthly data that is lagging, we make a slight turn, and then we have to wait another month or two before seeing the result of that turn and doing it again. And he then compared, very nice praise, what we're trying to do is helping make that business more of a speedboat, right? Where you can react more in real time across that entire sort of professional services value chain.
Okay. Have you ever wondered how successful architecture, engineering, and construction companies scale their business?
Or have you ever wanted guidance on how to get more growth, wealth, and freedom from your AEC company?
Well, then you're in luck. Hi, I'm Will Forat.
And I'm Justin Nagel, and we're your podcast hosts.
We interview successful AEC business leaders to learn how they use people, process, and technology to scale their businesses.
So sit back and get ready to learn from the industry's best. This is
Building Scale.
Hey listeners, it's Will here. Our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy. If you've ever listened to our show, then you know that the 3 pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology. So if you suspect technology is your weak link, then book a call with us to see where we can help maximize your company's IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
Today on Building Scale, we're joined with Matt Cooper. Matt joined BQE as CEO in 2023. His focus is building a truly customer-obsessed organization that delivers great software and even better service. BQE Core is the only proposal-to-paid solution built to streamline workflows, close process gaps, and provide real-time visibility into project performance and profitability. The goal is simple: help teams spend less time fighting systems and more time doing the impactful work they love. Through the years of experience and hard lessons, Matt learned that the best outcomes come for companies and customers when we're putting customers first. And outside of work, you'll find Matt spending time with his kids and dogs, which I just got a puppy in the last 3 weeks. So I'm in this dog category again in my life. So I appreciate that. And with all that said, Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, and watch out. That is going to be more work than you anticipate with the puppy.
Already way too much work. My wife is an unbelievable, she's like, actually we call her the Lorax because she calls about she won't kill bugs. She doesn't like when you pull a leaf off a tree. It's she's hardcore. So she obviously loves them dogs, and we're waiting. And I was super dad at Christmas and said, okay, do the dog thing for Christmas. And it's been great. I didn't expect a 9-week-old puppy though, which I highly don't recommend when you just have life happening. But yeah, but nonetheless, really cute dog. So she sold me on it. She's the salesperson in this relationship, I think.
That's our familial dynamic also, so I get it.
Yes. So I said all these fun things, but you tell us a little bit more about you, your background, and then BQE and how awesome the company is.
Yeah, we'll do the sort of linear time view. So I got my career started in management consulting, working with large Fortune 500 type firms, learned some really good lessons there, but ultimately realized a bunch of years into that journey, I cared about growth, I cared about technology. And I spent the past dozen or so years before BQE effectively working as a consultant to founder-run, vertically oriented B2B software companies.
Boy,
which is a little bit of a mouthful, but what you could describe as BQE is firm management for architecture and engineering, you could describe that as firm management or business management for restaurants or hotels, or interior designers often have different software than architects and engineers, for example. So really loved the context of working with founders, really loved the context of working with scaling organizations and getting to know the customer base. One of those businesses I was fortunate enough to work with was BQE in that role. And as the founder who had been running the firm for nearly 30 years was stepping away, we had formed a really great relationship and had the opportunity to jump.
Wow. So tell us, 30 years founder-led, 2023 you come into play. So what does that look like? I feel like, you said, I love the founder-led, and now it is not so founder-led anymore. So we're the scalability is still there, but a slight change.
Sure. Well, I don't know what everyone's notion of a new leader coming into a business that had done things one way for 28 or so years. This was not a saunter in with full confidence that I knew exactly what to do. But what I would say is because I'd had the context for the business beforehand, I understood a little bit about some of the challenges the business was going to face, a little bit about what the customers cared about, and had a little bit of a notion that I might be able to help that I'm sure was couched in anxieties and things like that. But I think the key is stepping in, understanding I didn't have all the answers. The suggestion from all mentors was go and talk to customers. And within my first month or two, spoke with 300 or so. And it simply validated that we had a really strong foundation, that with a bit of investment, we could do even more to serve architecture and engineering firms increasingly well. So,
holy cow, 300 calls with clients in what?
My calendar was fairly back to back with customer calls early on. Yes.
That's one way to get customer-centric focused. You actually talk to the people that you're trying to serve.
Maybe the one lesson there is all of those customers have feature requests, and we very quickly had to figure out how to triage and communicate around that. But it was great. We were in a fortunate enough position that we've been able to execute on what we thought we needed to do. And that was invest heavily in the right leadership team for that next stage of growth. We have more than doubled the size of our product and engineering team, the folks who are directly building software. We have substantially invested in the kind of services we can provide our customers. Our perspective and part of the thesis coming in is that architects and engineers have been substantially underserved by firm management software in the past. I will frankly group our software historically in that bucket as well. We view that as, from a business strategy standpoint, real opportunity for us. And simply on a human level, like, it's so great serving architects and engineers. Like, they are such neat customers, and it's been rewarding to be able to try to help that community.
Obviously, at Spot, we focus in the AEC space as well. So we love our art side, our builders, our engineers. I feel like they're like the different kids in class, but there's something about each of them that you just love.
I mean, I'll give one. I went to visit a customer in Southern California last week, and it's a architecture / placemaking business. Okay. And the buildings are beautiful and the aesthetics are perfect. They took me to their firm garden and had me eat a sugar snap pea and a ripe strawberry from the garden. And it's just like the sort of spaces they are able to develop and the work they do as someone who does not have a design bone in his body is really rewarding to be able to engage with.
I will say I agree. In the last 4 years of us running this podcast and talking to leaders in the space, I have an unbelievably I'm way more impressed with design now than I ever had in my life when I go into a building and I'm like, oh, look, and I'm noticing things. I couldn't possibly tell you why it works, but I certainly can notice. And I'm like, this is designed really well. I don't, you just feel different in here. So yeah, I know that feeling, but that sounds like the most California design firm that I've ever heard in my life. Here, have a snap peek. Here we go.
They were really wonderful. So yeah exactly.
That's cool. So what did that transition from founder to you look like? That seems like that's a leap to a degree. So how did that go with the team and everything else?
So I've seen it go a lot of different directions. Again, in my prior dozen years, I'd probably worked with 15 or 20 founder-run businesses, many of which executed founder-run transitions. I think it's a similar theme around listening, like similar to the notion of having conversations with each of the customers. You have to have conversations with each of the employees to understand what's working, what's not working, what do we need to do to take the company to the next level. And that helped sort of create the path that we needed to go on over the last 2 or 3 years since I've been there. So, people will give you a lot of grace if you come in, don't pretend to know everything and are willing to ask thoughtful questions, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Then Matt, I think this is a good time to kind of ask, you mentioned client experience as being really important. What does that look like?
So I think for a software company, at least, a lot of times software companies index very heavily on just the software, right? And I think especially for longer lived software companies, a lot of times you start to think you know what the software should be doing. And I actually think that was one of BQE's challenges. We were founded by an architect and an engineer fundamentally, and that imbued the company with the right DNA. But I think also sometimes you're like, well, we're an architect and an engineer and we know what we should be building. And so for me, there's the software element, which is we have to understand how to take clicks out, make sure this represents real workflows for your day-to-day. And ultimately, you have to make it easy and add value. I was on with a prospective customer this morning who had been looking at some solutions. And I relayed a story, which is talking with a team a couple weeks ago. They basically said, look, our project managers are busy. If your software will make them take more than a 2-inch step over like a gap between what we're doing now and what's going to happen in the future, they are not going to step over that gap. And so you have to kind of find a way to keep narrowing that, take out the frictions, and make sure the software is easy enough to use and adds clear value. For a software company, there is also the services, which many forget. Implementations of what is effectively firm management or ERP software is not necessarily the easiest. I think, and you all probably understand that. The pitch is not, oh, this will take a few days and you'll be up and running. But I think it's, well, how do we guide you through it? Make sure we're being thoughtful, making sure we're redoing discovery to make sure we're implementing the right way, and then having the right support infrastructure. So as you're getting started, you continue to learn and get value out of the software.
Not to mention the industry has been burned multiple times by,
so many times.
Previous generations of software companies. So the feeling of apprehension is usually very strong in the air of, is it going to work? Because these are huge changes, right? This is essentially my entire business needs to work through this thing, right?
Sure.
And if it doesn't work, or if it creates a lot of friction in the wrong places, people shake their heads, and then just it can lead to other disasters.
Well, it languishes, or the firm knows about using the software, or I call this the Atlas phenomenon, as in I believe it's Greek titan of myth who had to carry the world on their shoulders. A lot of times with these legacy systems, you have the one person who does every single report, sends out every single invoice, manages the entire weight of the firm and its systems on their shoulders. And that's something we're trying to avoid here. That's not fun for anyone. So, yeah. Well, really, I think one other learning that we've tried to sort of incorporate is when you're launching software like this, you do not know 100% of the software by the time you are done with implementation. Like that should not be the goal. And so if we're talking about what good client experience looks like, it's how do we gradually get you from, let's say, 20, 30% to, no one should ever learn 100%, but to 60, 70, 80% to continue to add value over the next 12 to 24 months.
So we've spoken previously, and part of this also is talking about some of the problems. So you'd interviewed a lot of your customers. So what problems have you seen that, let's say, maybe the industry has not solved that you've solved to help sort of propel the industry forward?
The word we came up with when it came to running, let's call it a small to mid-sized architecture and engineering firm, was chaos, effectively. And it shouldn't even be the word we came up with. That was the most common. If you did one of those word cloud reports, that was, or charts,
the
that
big
was the
middle was chaos
word that we heard. Maybe the easiest way to answer that one is if you think about, for an A&E firm or any professional services firm, that sort of workflow, which is you have to win business, staff projects, manage projects, invoice and collect for projects. And there are challenges across that entire workflow for an A&E firm. And so come on up front, but many don't have really standardized processes for business development or proposal generation or even bidding strategy on how much you charge for a project. Staffing is often done at spreadsheets. And so there are common themes in the industry around certainly being overstaffed, but understaffing leading to burnout. There's a lot of turnover. If you surveyed firm leaders, they would say one of their most common challenges or worried is recruitment and retention of talent is like number one and number two in a lot of surveys. When it comes to managing the project, most firms often don't have visibility into how that project is performing until it is way too late to do anything. And then you are not able to deliver a change order, you're eating excess fees, and then invoicing takes so long. And many firms probably could cut 2-3 weeks out of their DSOs with a bit of process. And so when you string that along and look at each of those for what is fundamentally a chaotic type of business to run with a decent amount of volatility that is not always very high margin, as one of the themes in the industry is A&E firms would like to drive higher margins. Each of those contributes, and that's some of what we try to support with our software.
Got it. Okay. So what...
Maybe here's like an interesting way I was talking to a customer and he described the way they used to run their business as a battleship.
Okay.
Which is, look, we get data every so often, and based on that monthly data that is lagging, we make a slight turn, and then we have to wait another month or two before seeing the result of that turn and doing it again. And he then compared a very nice praise. What we're trying to do is helping make that business more of a speedboat, right? Where you can react more in real time across that entire sort of professional services value chain.
Okay. That's you talking about process. Does a small, mid-sized AE firm, is that the space where you see like, wow, you just don't have some processes in place, like sans the technology component to this, but you don't have a great process of like, how do you get the talent when you eventually get a project, and you don't really have a way of getting projects, but when you do get one, hey, how did you then get, consistency and then filling that project with?
It's variable.
Okay.
There are a lot of firms in the space. I would say that most firms who have grown beyond a couple dozen have some form of process, right? Like you are staffing out of a spreadsheet, you are sending invoices out of a combination of spreadsheet, QuickBooks, and maybe Word. Like they have, part of why I love serving this industry is architects and engineers are very creative at crafting solutions, right? That's part of that sort of role, but they end up just not being scalable, or they end up having embedded inefficiencies in the current processing.
Sure. So then when when BQE comes around, is that a place that helps them with those processes, even though it's a technology, but like, is it, streamlining some of that to make it a little bit more scalable?
Yeah, absolutely. That is sort of our reason for being. One example to make it a little bit more tangible might just be invoicing, right? And so a lot of firms right now will batch their invoices once a month. They will be trying to track their projects over here. Once a month, they will then take that project data and try to translate it into an invoicing spreadsheet. They then have to produce a lot of invoices, get feedback, go back to all of those different documents to get the invoices out the door, and then somehow track whether firms have paid. It's a lot. I very much sympathize with the often one person at the firm that needs to manage that process versus what, for example, we are able to enable is you have managed your projects, you have entered time and expenses or percent complete against those projects. You press a button and it batch creates all of your invoices, right? And so what we hear is that firms, that the person sort of carrying the world on their shoulder is able to cut out up to 80% of that time so they can focus on other value add activities for the firm and get invoices out. The firm I mentioned about the battleship told us they cut sort of 2 to 3 weeks out of their invoicing cycle and collection cycle. And
whoa,
I often don't think firms translate. I think firms know when there are cash crunches, right? You get anxious about paying your employees or having enough cash on hand. But like there is real value to cash, right? You don't have to pay interest on the short-term loan, or you can leverage it for other purposes. The cost of capital is real, and it's real savings just from that sort of 2 to 3 week DSO reduction itself.
Yeah. And if it's being done by the software, you're also decreasing mistakes, just human error components that people, it's the small things. It's all we call it soft cost loss, where it's the time, like small batches of time that then create massive loss if you add those up, or mistakes, right? I mean, like people in the industry hate when you have to do rework. It's like, oh, we just have to do rework because we didn't do something right. And it's like the same concept goes for anything you do in a business. It's like, if you have to do it multiple times because something was wrong, it's like, well, that's always bad.
This is death by 1,000 paper cuts right here.
Yeah.
Well, and it's such a good point. Like what I describe as your traditional return on investment calculation, but often what resonates the most is like, no, everyone remembers when you sent the wrong invoice to your number one client and they get really upset about that, right? And so it's happened to every firm. And yes, that would be one of the value props for our software, is minimizing that risk.
What's a thing? Okay, so we heard a little bit about experience. What's something when we talk about design, especially in software, you talked about removing clicks. What's something that you've solved specifically, or what's something that you've heard on repeat, right, when you came in, that was solved, right? Was there any big things that you heard on repeat that eventually you were like, okay, we have to do this?
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. The one that comes to mind first is, I'll just make a statement. It's tough to be a project manager, right? If you are a project manager at an A&E firm, first of all, there is a thematic macro trend where there are not enough project managers for architecture and engineering firms, and there are structural reasons for that. So you are sort of strapped in the first place for time, and you have to wear so many hats in that role. And what we were hearing from customers or folks in that role is, it's difficult to do my job. I don't have the information I need to manage this project effectively, or I have to go every time I want that information. I have to run down there to get someone else to produce a report, and then I don't even know what's happening with the invoices I'm sending, but I'm responsible for making sure we're collecting on them, and so on and so forth. And so one of the things I'm really proud of our team for doing is consolidating all of that information into one view for a project manager. We call it our project overview, but you can see everything about time, expenses, project performance, your schedule, which again is, we'll go back to the word chaotic or chaos. It's a challenging role. I'm highly empathetic to people who are in it. And that was one of the things where we tried to say, look, our overarching goal is to empower the different roles at A&E firms. And that was one way we tried to support PMs.
Okay. Well, considering that there aren't enough, trust me, we've heard it too. There's definitely not enough PMs out there for A&E. Very, very helpful to have sort of quick insight into what's going on. What other things have you heard, or did you hear in, let's say, your 300 interviews and went, oh, we have to solve that?
Plenty more for now. A few of the bigger ones that I would hit quickly are firms at this size often have to manage multiple disparate systems where they are taking data from one and putting it into the other. And we've said, well, how do we make that easier for firms in a bunch of different ways? And so an example, we introduced sort of our open APIs and a Zapier integration, which might not resonate for everyone in the audience, but for the percentage of firms that really care about connecting to other platforms, that was a big deal. We embedded a payroll solution in the software because that was a manual touch point between core and payroll. And ultimately, the theme here is, how do we take out the manual work? How do we take out the double entry? And how do we take out the clicks required to do all of these things?
Not to mention, when you start connecting payroll to your system where you're doing time entry, you can start doing metrics.
That is one of the, yes, some of our customers' eyes light up when we're talking about those kinds of things. So,
because then you can actually understand, like, you can really understand profitability without going like directly. You can understand profitability on a project to a much more detailed level. Yep. So then you can actually track progress and profitability. And do you need to staff less or staff more, on certain projects based on the profitability, right? There is such a thing as too much profitability. Some people would disagree with me, but clients or customers can feel it, right? When they feel like they're being charged too much. They might not say anything if they're being charged too little. That's on you, right? But the metrics should help with that. So that's a way to deal with that problem.
Yeah.
So,
and one reaction to what you're saying is the kind of things I'm describing might not seem revolutionary necessarily. Oh, we're going to connect two systems, or we're going to build the right dashboard for a project manager to manage their business effectively. But frankly, there has been firm management software for A&E firms for 40 years. But it's the different that we go back to client experience between no one is in your firm wants to engage with the legacy software. It might have, a CRM module. It might have the project management module. It might have all of these things. And so for us, a lot of times it's been less, hey, let's completely reinvent the wheel on what firms need, and simply look, firms deserve easy to use, polished software that their folks are willing to engage with. How do we deliver that?
That actually brings up a good point. Where is that line of innovating compared to like, we do the thing and we do it well, let's keep doing the thing?
I would say most of our resources are pointed at how do we do what firms already know they need and we do a version of, but how do we even do it even better, right? We've been around for a long time, and so we certainly have areas in the software that could use a refresh. One this last year was staffing and resource allocation. That is as I've learned, a very challenging, I knew it from my consulting days, but it's a very challenging problem. We had a version of that, but as we've learned and as technology has grown, we effectively rebuilt that module for our customers to help them manage more effectively. And so most of our resourcing is going there. There is certainly resourcing going toward what we would call innovation. Those are, AI tools, things like that. But, if you ask, this is where listening to your customers has been so helpful. If you ask customers what they don't want bright, shiny, new most of the time. They want, fewer clicks. They want to get through their usage of the software faster so they can get back to project work or home to their family or whatever they want to, spend their time on versus dealing in software. So
we get similar feedback. Doing IT and cybersecurity in this space, you get the feedback of like, we just kind of want it to work. Like we don't. Did it just work? Because that would be great. And instead of trying to say like, oh, there's new stuff that we could do or dive into, you know, about AI, all that kind of stuff. It's like, no, how about we just get the thing that I want you to do to just work? And then and we'll be super happy. Like we'll be so happy.
Verbatim the phrase we'd hear, right? And it makes sense. Folks don't want to spend their time focusing on the software. And in many ways, the right software is one that doesn't require them to invest all of their time into it. Yep.
No,
it completely resonates.
When you look at firms based on sizes, do you see different either modules or problems that are solved at different sizes? Like, do you see like, a 150 person firm compared to a 20 person firm, and they're just the problems that they're trying to solve using your services and software are different?
Yeah, and there's not a precise, it's not like, oh, you've hit 20, you now have new problems. It's
you've leveled up and now you get to fight the dragon or whatever.
And I would say, for example, we have firms with 10 employees running more in a more sophisticated way than firms with 150 at times. And so It just depends on firm needs and where you are. I would say the breakpoints we contemplate internally are sort of like, you've got 1 to 5 employees, you've got maybe 5 to 20, 20 to 100, and above 100. And those are effectively the rough breakpoints in terms of what firms are trying to contemplate, where as we are developing the software we're thinking of. So just illustratively, and I'm sure there are differing opinions on this, but sub 5, one of the things I've heard a lot of times is I look at my bank account at the beginning of the year and I look at it at the end of the year. And if it has gone up, we had a successful year.
Boy.
So judging by reactions, you have heard that too at times. Yeah. And so there, I think it's a lot about some financial clarity, the basics of process. But at that point, it's still a very sort of founder owner driven firm. You don't want a lot of overhead at that stage, right? It's the basics. 5 to 20, I think you are trying to build good process around things like invoicing, around how you are presenting sort of project status and information. That's what I would contemplate there. I mean, it is worth noting, believe from census data, 85% of firms are sub 20 employees. And so I feel like that 5 to 20 is a sort of challenging leap for a lot of firms.
Yeah.
That's one. No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, it's similar in our the managed services IT space. It seems like, I think it's like 94% of companies are like less than 5 people and usually under $1 million in revenue. They're just really small. Like, it's just the reality of it. And then the middle there is the challenge, right? Similar, that it's like, oh, now you're in the challenging, really, really challenging part. Not that any part of business isn't challenging, but like really hard to like get the movement. And then you have a few bigger, more Goliath size companies. And it's just like that seems to be the same, at least what we've seen in the A&E space.
Yep. Yeah. That's very consistent. And as you start going up, you have more people. And so I would say that next bucket is your staffing resource allocation challenge. You can't look around the office anymore and know what everyone is working on. You start to bring in more specialized employees, like you sort of level up often your finance leader, bring in BD. And so you've got a whole rash of challenges building out into sort of defined functions. And then above 100, you are wrestling with just increasing complexity. And in our experience, you are starting to look not just at, from a software standpoint, best in class, but more of a best of breed. Like, do I now need a Salesforce CRM? Do I now need X, Y, or Z? Just because the complexity and the size of each function starts to grow. So
yeah, makes sense.
That was a lot of complication distilled down into about 2 minutes, but it is a challenging journey, I will acknowledge, for firms.
For sure. But it gives more color on the idea. We obviously, when we think of scalability, people, process, technology, those kind of all fall in places, but like which of those need a little bit more thought? It just shifts depending on where you are in your journey.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Maybe we should talk about technology for a second. I'm sure part of your conversations, AI has come up. Why don't you talk about what has come up, and then we'll call it opinion on AI.
Sure. AI is important and will become increasingly important. The question, though, that I hear most is, what AI tools do you have for me? Or how do we use the AI? And I would encourage firms and firm leaders to sort of flip that question around and start more with the problem you are trying to solve versus jumping to what is effectively a tool to solve problems, right? And so what I often say when I hear that question is actually, why don't you ask yourself, what are the 3 business problems or process problems that you were trying to solve? And then we can figure out if AI is the right tool for that. And I'll just give you an example. I got an email the other day from a prospective customer who said, I need these 3 AI applications. I need to be able to launch different templates of projects so I don't have to create a project each time. I need to batch process invoices with AI, and I need to be able to sort of generate summaries of when projects are in trouble, going over budget, going behind schedule. And you absolutely could leverage AI for all of those, but also those have existed in our software for some time. And what you're often talking about is sort of templates, automations, integrations that might exist and be cheaper and more simple for you to implement now and maybe augment with AI in the future. But again, there are existing tools if you're starting with what's the problem we're trying to solve.
So people are saying AI, and what they really mean is automation.
Oftentimes, yes. Yeah. I would say most of the time.
I think the one thing with, and certainly in the last 2 years with like chat becoming very accessible, like AI just being more accessible to people, I think that is the reality. Because like automation before seemed so far away unless you're like a manufacturer or something. Like it just conceptually just seemed like so out of touch. But now it's like with AI, it's like, oh, there's lots of things that can then be, the access to automation seems to be easier, which I think is where the trick is for people to like, oh, well, it's actually this. I mean, Microsoft itself has a automation backend tool that almost everybody that has a business license has access to this. So it just becomes like, well, you've actually had access to automating things. Like if you wanted to automate, like when an email comes in this way and it does this, put it in this file and do this with that, and then notify this person and do like, or hey, onboarding a new employee, here's the checklist. You push the button and here's like, these emails go here and all, like those things exist. But I think people just didn't have any concept of it. And I think AI is just like opened up the idea like, holy crap, we could use technology like to like really do some cool stuff, I think. And maybe it started with like recipes for chicken masala, but it then got to the place of like, what can I do in business for this? It writes emails for me, or oh, it does this for me. So I think I agree with you. That's exactly where we're at. It's really automation is the place that you really are trying to invest in most cases, but you're thinking AI is just going to think of it and do it all for you, which is like, we're not there. Like, we're not to the place of like, just build me, my full marketing strategy and then start executing on it. It's like, that doesn't work. You have to have something to go off of.
Yep. Well, and I would say there are applications that have been quite useful that we've explored with our customers or for ourselves. Like we do find that content generation, for example, there's time savings. We get good ideas. Like that is a useful application. I think a lot of firms are leveraging it for proposal generation, which makes perfect sense to distill an RFP down, for example. We get a lot of benefit from meeting summaries. It allows us to be a lot more responsive to customers versus relying on my chicken scratch notes at the end of the meeting. Like we know
all of these random pieces of paper I have here.
Yeah, exactly. And so that looks exactly like my side of the desk is. And so that's valuable. But, and actually, for example, for us, the coding tools are at a point where that can make you more efficient. But all with caveats and not panaceas for what everyone is trying to do. I would say, at least internally, we've tried, for the 2 or 3 tools that we have gotten a lot of value for, we have invested a lot in the 20 or so that weren't ready or weren't the right application for us. So we're learning that lesson also, I would say. And I also don't want to be too backward sounding. We are investing heavily in AI for our customers. We'll be launching plenty in 2026. But again, it's founded on what problem are they trying to solve that AI is the right application, not let's throw a bunch of AI spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks for our customers, right?
You're being intentional is, I think, the word.
Intentional is the more sophisticated word I was looking for, yes.
For sure.
So if automation is actually what people are looking for, yes, AI might be more of an outlier of what's needed. This is more perspective. What do people need to do in their A&E firms to essentially progress to where they legitimately need AI? Because they need more automation than they need AI. So BQE is obviously part of that equation from a technology standpoint. But do you feel like anything else needs to change, whether it's culturally or process-wise or anything else, maybe even data? What needs to change so that they can be on their journeys? A majority of your clients, right, or customers are on the smaller end, right? I don't remember exactly what the numbers are, but they're on the smaller end. So talk to us about, we'll call it the majority of who are your customers.
Yeah, I would say that sort of reflects the histogram of firm sizes in the country. And I'm not trying to serve the sort of 10,000 person firm well. But we do feel like we're the right fit for a lot of firms. There are a lot of steps, right? I'd say if you are on a legacy system that is often disconnected databases in the structure, and they or you will have a lot of work to be able to sort of pull those together to really enable AI to be valuable when it comes to the data that is in the system. So that's a big lift. We have seen some of the more firms at more of the sort of cutting edge or forefront starting to implement the various names, but effectively a technology council or a technology lead who is exploring what is the right tooling, ideally predicated on what problems they are trying to solve. But firms have been sort of active in trying to figure out, with the rapid change in technology, what they need to do. And so those are a couple examples of firms starting to prepare for rapidly changing technology. I think, another one, which is a little bit self-serving to say, I think a lot of firms have gotten comfortable with the legacy solution. It does produce the financial statements, but it is often worth taking your head up to see what is out there because technology is changing. And again, our reason for being is our goal is not simply to produce financial statements for the firm, but empower each person on the staff to deliver better and drive actual operational improvement, right? That's a big one. Business results and client results.
Which really means higher productivity, right? It's just a simple, another way of saying higher productivity. So do you see, so there's a lot of talk about, we'll call it architecture and engineering and white collar being afraid for their jobs because that is, digitally speaking, that is where a lot of A&E is at. I have an opinion on this, but I'm not going to say it and talk about it until we get your opinion. Do you feel that that's actually true? Should people really be afraid for their jobs?
So my purview is mostly on the business side of A&E. And so I have talked with firms about what they are exploring on the design side. I think certain firms have found certain applications to become more efficient, ideate faster, but I would not be well positioned to comment on like the impact of AI on the design side. I think on the business side, these firms run with lean back offices in the first place, right? You scale up to a 100-person firm, you might have a few people managing billing and finance. And so, in a world where the vast majority of a firm's staff is sort of design or project execution, my software won't have that much of an impact. It hopefully makes everyone more efficient. You can win more projects if you have staff freed up. You can perform better and grow. But I don't think this is a sort of headcount reduction play for firms. I think it's a drive to acceptable margins and help my firm scale effectively type of play.
Okay. So it gives the ability for then the firms to be able to experiment, right? R&D as well as, growth. Higher margin compression happens all the time. So, there's competition everywhere they go. So for them, they should be looking at it as a competitive edge as long as it's implemented correctly. So that's the key. That's the key here is tread carefully. Don't assume that it's going to help without doing some testing.
I think that's fair. That goes to at least for BQE, that goes to our investment in the right services to mitigate the risk of any sort of transition. Or I'm sure that's how you all sort of think about it as well, right?
Yeah.
And we do also work with partners who are able to help, but this is the learning. However it is delivered, whether in-house or third party, it is important that it is done the right way. Yes, I would 100% with that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that is effectively change management. Like, it's just like if you anything, and it doesn't have to be technology. Always, you always kind of pair these together. But like changing of process, where you're going to just do something completely different now. It's like how you then make that change and like manage through that change is that's almost the more important part than like the technology or the idea or the process change actually is, because it's like, we believe this is better, but if nobody buys into it, it doesn't really matter if it's the best solution or the worst solution. It's never going to work because we're never going to get any buy.
Well, and one of the things that we've learned is a lot of times let's say the person who made the decision to purchase the software is not necessarily the person then charged with implementing the software. And more generally, firms don't want to change our kind of software more than every 5 or 10 years. We've actually seen that compressing a little bit as technology is changing, but you don't want to implement an ERP every 6 months. Let's just be honest.
Oh my God.
That sounds horrible.
Horrible. That sounds like a humongous headache. Yeah.
But as a result, like there's no reason that firms should have the in-house sort of muscle memory around it if you're only doing it so infrequently. And for a lot of our firms, there's the sort of design or execution software, and there's the firm management software. Those are the tools. And so one of the things we've had to invest in and sort of coach on is like, well, what should the project team be? Who needs to be involved? Who needs to contribute to the decisions as we go? Because again, in the example I gave, which is a real example, person purchased, we implemented with sort of an entirely different person, and there was a disconnect the whole way. And so getting that right, and we've actually thought of it, we used to call it training, and we now talk about it as a consulting with our customers, because if you're just training, you're missing the change management part, right?
Okay. Is that how you combat the the frustration of implementing anything new, or the friction, maybe not frustration, the friction when you try to create something new or try to implement something new, by saying like, hey, knowing who's actually going to be the end user here and like having conversations with them in comparison to the person that makes the buying decision, I don't know, piloting it or doing whatever the process is. Like, how do you go from like, hey, the owner's going to purchase this thing, but it's, project managers that are dealing with this, or who, the rest of the firm is dealing with this, not just that person. How do you make sure that like, oh, we want to have a great client experience, and to do that, we need to do X. What is that?
Yeah. And it's constantly evolving, but it's how crisply can we communicate a plan, keep it in front of everyone, the entirety, what are the updates we are providing to all of the different stakeholders, what's the skill sets of our folks who have to deliver that, to make sure that there's you have to be willing to push back at times in a consulting role, and training on that. And so it's been a journey. One of the things we talk about, at least internally, there's a sort of change management curve, which is everyone, you start, everyone's excited, and you get into the morass, and I think the y-axis is sort of morale and enthusiasm, and that dips inevitably, and you implement successfully, and the positivity ramps back up. But part of it is managing through that dip and making sure we and our customers are aware of that phenomenon, right?
Yeah, I think disenfranchised for a short time because they think it's all unicorns and rainbows the entire time. Change is hard.
Change is hard, yeah.
Let's be honest here for a second. Change is really hard, and it's disruptive, and people don't like it.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I will say from just thinking, putting my sales hat on, the single most common reason we do not win is inertia, right? It's no decision at the end of the day. And it's exactly that phenomenon you just described, which
Empathy.
is, well, there is safety in perceived safety in what we have been doing, I would say, especially in an industry that's changing more rapidly. I think it is perceived as the operative word there, but perceived safety in what we know, and therefore we will avoid a change.
Yeah, apathy. It's a bitch.
Well, I'm not sure I would characterize it as apathy, but it's there's fear in like they don't care, right? Like these owners pour their blood, sweat, and tears into the business, but it feels less risky to remain in the status quo at times, I would say. Or alternatively, I'm sort of a big believer, or my career has taught me, everyone is sort of a rational actor in a way. And so if folks realize there was a better alternative, folks are rational. Like they will make a change to their process or the people they're staffing, but that takes a lot of work and insight to see that. And, we might not express that on a demo or in a conversation or X, Y, or Z, right?
Yep. Okay. Justin, should we talk about signal and noise?
Sure.
Okay, this will be the last thing that we talk about, because we had a conversation previous to the podcast, and I feel like we should talk about it. So, signal compared to just noise. This is really about looking at, say, the industry, what to work on, what not to work on, right? What to ignore, because I'm sure you get 1,000 requests a day on features, right? And I'm sure every single one of those features could help at least one firm. But if you implemented every single one of those 1,000+ features a day, now you've got tens of thousands of features that have been implemented. It's not going to be a usable piece of software anymore. So how do you recognize signal versus noise?
Yeah, it's interesting. I got an email the other day. We took out a feature or at least a configuration. And I got the email saying, well, you all are investing in the software. You're supposed to add features, not take them away. And I was very sympathetic because I'm sure that one feature made that one individual's life much better. But we actually had an internal conversation because a lot of people get that email saying, well, like we have to build what is right for the long-term success of our customers and the business. And to your point, that is not simply adding more features into the software. And so I wouldn't say we are perfect at figuring out the signal from the noise, but we have built a really strong product management team that is taking inputs in customer conversations. We are listening in our customer success conversations. We do literally have an inbox where customers will send us features. We read every one. Sometimes our customers ask. Every single one gets read and prioritized. And that team, leverages their methodology and wisdom at working in the A&E industry for long enough to help us prioritize for our customers. We produce a roadmap. We then validate that roadmap with customers. And so there is a lot of input that gets synthesized through what is an imperfect process, but one we are, I think, reasonably proud of and constantly iterating.
Thank you. That's a pretty good answer. I like it.
To your point, there are a lot of voices. We have several thousand customers. They are very passionate, right? Because this, if you are an owner, this is ultimately the business side of your firm and a large percentage of your assets. If you are the person who manages all the invoices and the back office, we are trying to get you home at a reasonable time versus you working pat. We always joke with our customers that we have 24/7 support, and we hope you are not up at 1 a.m, but it's difficult running a firm. So my point being, like, they care enormously that we continue to improve because it directly impacts their wealth, career progression, whether they can make it to the soccer game on weekend, right?
Okay. Something else, and I think this is more relevant to sort of today, to sort of where we are at in the world today. How often does cybersecurity come up as a question around your software?
We get asked with frequency about it. I'm not sure the questions are always very specific, but there are always concerns around. The questions would be, is my data safe? Are we safe from hackers? Things like that would be the general kind of questions we get.
I'm so proud of the AE for this. I will tell you that right now. I'm just happy they're asking something. Right? It doesn't, like, what the ask is, we can figure out maybe better questions to be asked later. But like the fact that you're thinking about it is the important part. Certainly through our eyes as looking at cybersecurity every day.
Well, I mean, it's scary out there. Like, so first of all, we are SOC 2 Type 2 certified. And we have a trust center where we are able to express the level of rigor that has gone into our management of data and security for our firm. And I think customers ask questions, then see how much rigor and documentation and the independent audit that go into it and feel quite a bit better. But it's I'll be honest, and I don't think this should dissuade anyone from cloud-based software. Going back to on-prem is not the answer here, but it's scary out there. Like I shared with you some of the example phishing attacks that we see firms are often susceptible to out there, not through our software, but generally, and you have to be very vigilant and aware. So, we as an example do monthly phishing scam tests where we send all of our employees and I think it's AI generated to tailor to them email. They're very good emails, but we think it's important to be constantly vigilant for us, and probably certainly important for A&E firms to be vigilant as well. I told you guys earlier, we do not publicly shame the folks who did not pass the phishing scam.
Shame. Cling, 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 cling. Shame.
No, we do not do that, but we do have constructive trainings in that situation. Yes.
So for anyone that doesn't know what SOC 2 Type 2 is, that's pretty rigorous in terms of understand. That's a whole process, and it's third-party audited to be able to say you have a process in securing data and how you are sort of moving that data and what are you doing with it. So that is not easy to get for any firm, and the bigger you are, the harder it is to get, because you have to change a lot of things in a lot of different places to be able to go. This is not something that you can just learn and then, I just check a box. It is third-party audited to be able to get SOC 2 Type 2.
We'll take 5 seconds to give a shout out to Mike from our team who led that process. It was a lot of work. So,
yeah.
Good job, Mike.
Good job, Mike. Justin, I think it's time for our last question. What do you think?
Absolutely. Yes, it's a question we like to ask all of our guests, Matt. So if you could go back 20 years, it'd be 2006, what advice would you give yourself?
20 years ago is 2006.
I know. That's I graduated high school. Oh, that's 20-year reunion here. Here we go.
I would say it is tying it back to the beginning of the conversation. It would have been to ask better questions and listen more, which I think has been a hard-earned learning over the past 20 years. But it would have benefited me materially to be more comfortable being wrong, being a little bit more vulnerable, admitting that there were things to learn out there versus jumping in and thinking I might have had all the answers to start. I think that's the one that comes to mind.
Yes, I always not believing you know everything is a good life strategy, in my opinion.
Yeah, we talk a lot internally about having a growth mindset and how to cultivate that internal to BQE. And I think if you're not asking questions and not listening, it's tougher. Yeah, reflecting back on 20 years, that would have been a helpful bit of advice for future me to have been able to give.
It's actually funny because everybody says they want to grow. Like that's what everybody says this. But then if you think you know everything, it's like, well, then you couldn't possibly grow. Like there'd be nothing to grow to do. You already know it all. So what's the growth there? So
that's called cognitive dissonance.
There's no practical follow-up to that question. You all haven't invented a time machine that's going to now allow me to. No, find out on a future show.
That service line we haven't quite pushed out yet, but once we do, we'll make sure you're on our mailing list. So yes, this has been a lot of fun. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
All of our customers have my email address, and I encourage everyone to ping me. It is matt.cooper@bqe.com. I am, along with the other hundreds of Matt Coopers on LinkedIn, but that's the Matt Cooper who works at BQE, I suppose.
Got it. Awesome. And is there anything else you'd like to tell the people before we say our goodbyes?
No, I'll simply say I really appreciate it, guys. I had a lot of fun and enjoyed catching up with you all. Thanks for the tough questions.
Awesome. All right, audience, we had a blast. I hope you did as well. And until next time, adios.
Thanks for listening to Building Scale. To help us reach even more people, please share this episode with a friend, a colleague, or on social media.
Remember, the 3 pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology.
And our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy.
So if you think your company's technology pillar could use some improvement, Book a call with us to see how we can help maximize your IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
And until next time,
Keep building scale.